The great tragedy is that the same person who feels the most suffocating and judgmental to him is the one who desperately wants to feel safe and chosen by him. And the person who feels the most distant and emotionally absent to her is the one who desperately fears being seen as incompetent and unlovable. The disconnect is not in the love itself, but in the translation. You may be speaking English, and he may be speaking French, but you're both shouting about the same fundamental needs: safety, respect, and connection. Reversing the inner exit doesn't require a miracle or a complete personality overhaul. It requires the simple, sustained courage to learn his language of competence and space, and for him to learn her language of vulnerability and validation. The purpose of uncovering these harsh truths is not to give you permission to throw your hands up in despair. It is to give you a map of the territory you are fighting over. If you can stop seeing your partner's behavior as malice, and start seeing it as a desperate defense mechanism, you can stop fighting each other and start fighting the pattern. That silent chair at the dinner table, that physical presence with emotional absence, is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of the question. It is an invitation to stop relying on old, damaging. This is the hardest truth about long-term relationships, and it's one that often happens right under the surface of what looks like a perfectly fine life. The man who sleeps next to you in the same bed, but who has already left inside. Picture this scene, because it plays out in living rooms across every continent. You have built a good life. There's a mortgage, maybe a couple of children, a clean kitchen, and a shared calendar. The man is loyal, responsible. He shows up for the family functions. He still holds a job. He's not drinking or cheating or causing obvious trouble. Yet, the emotional air between you is thin, like a room with the windows perpetually shut. You are doing all the things society tells you are right. You are committed, you are not nagging, you are focusing on your own happiness and letting him have his space. But the connection is gone. That man, your husband, is physically present, but emotionally, he's in an escape pod, floating somewhere far away. Can you remember the last time you had a conversation with him that went deeper than logistics? A conversation where you felt he was truly seeing you, not just processing your words? For many women, that time is long ago, and that feeling is devastating. This isn't just your private failure. It is happening quietly in the living rooms of almost 8 out of 10 long-term couples I speak to. The physical abandonment is just the final receipt. The emotional exit is the real story, and it happens months, sometimes years, before he ever packs a bag. The pattern we're talking about here is the emotional shutdown loop, and it's the quiet killer of connection. This loop starts not because one person is inherently bad, but because two people with different emotional default settings and old childhood defense mechanisms start to unconsciously scare each other. For many men, the instinct when facing conflict, complaint, or judgment is to retreat into a psychological bunker. This isn't just about avoiding a fight. It's a deep-seated defense mechanism often modeled in childhood, where showing vulnerability or distress was met with ridicule, dismissal, or a punitive response. When he shuts down, he isn't trying to punish his partner. He is trying to self-regulate a nervous system that is going into overdrive, desperately attempting to protect a very fragile sense of self-worth. For the woman watching this retreat, the opposite mechanism is often activated. The need to pursue, to connect, to solve the distance. When she reaches out, maybe with frustration, maybe with valid complaint, she is often trying to signal, "I'm still here, I still want you to care, and I feel afraid of this growing gap." But what he hears is not a plea for connection. He hears an indictment, a judgment of his competency, or a demand for something he feels incapable of delivering. When a man feels judged or criticized by the person who is supposed to be his greatest supporter, it triggers his core fear. The fear of being seen as a failure, as useless, or as not enough. This feeling of failure is often far more painful and psychologically threatening to a man's identity than he will ever admit out loud. So the loop tightens. She pursues, he retreats. The inner exit is the moment he stops fighting the perceived criticism and starts accepting the outcome of the criticism. He stops arguing not because he agrees, but because he has made a quiet internal calculation that the emotional cost of engaging is always higher than the cost of silent compliance or avoidance. He begins to move his emotional investment elsewhere, into his work, into a solitary hobby, into friends, or simply into the neutral, numbing world of digital distraction. This isn't a sudden, grand decision. It's a slow, barely perceptible drift, like a boat cutting its engine and letting the tide take it. He doesn't physically pack his bags yet, because he still values the structure of the life you've built, the comfort of routine, and the social stability of being a married man. But he has mentally relocated. His effort stops being about building a shared future and starts being about maintaining a predictable, low-friction present. The problem isn't just personality or mood. It's two different emotional languages causing a continuous, low-grade relational injury that neither side knows how to stop. The husband is still there on the surface, but the emotional anchor has been lifted, and he is floating away on a sea of quiet resentment and self-protection. The inner world of the retreating husband is a landscape dominated by a few core psychological factors, and understanding them is crucial because they are almost never what the wife believes them to be. When he withdraws, he is often experiencing a profound loss of self-efficacy in the relationship. This is the simple belief that his efforts matter, that his contributions are valued, and that he can successfully impact the emotional climate of his own home. For many men, their entire identity structure is built around competence. Being a good provider, a problem solver, a fix-it man. When he tries to engage emotionally, perhaps by offering a logical solution to a feeling-based problem, or by minimizing the issue in an attempt to keep the peace, and is met with exasperation, tears, or renewed criticism, his brain processes this as a failure to solve the ultimate problem, his wife's unhappiness. This is a critical distinction. He doesn't pull away because he doesn't care about her unhappiness. He pulls away because he feels that his caring has proven ineffective, and staying in the conversation only leads to further injury to his self-worth. This perceived failure leads directly to a feeling of emotional uselessness. If everything he does to make her happy, to calm the situation, or to contribute to the emotional well-being of the partnership is consistently framed, in his eyes, as wrong or not enough, he begins to believe that the only logical conclusion is that he is the problem, or that the problem is unsolvable. This is the birth of the inner exit. He decides, not consciously, but as a defense strategy, that the pain of being judged is greater than the perceived reward of connection. He stops trying because trying means risking the deepest wound, the feeling of being inadequate in the most important arena of his life. Consider the small, vivid scenes that build this wall. The dinner conversation where he suggests a budget cut to save money, and she immediately dismisses it as him being controlling or cheap. He offered a solution, competence, but was met with a label, judgment. He feels the emotional door slam shut in his face. This happens repeatedly until he stops knocking. The things he never says out loud are often tied to his fear of being controlled or domesticated. The quiet life he settles into, the long hours at work, the extra focus on a hobby, the silence on the couch, is his way of maintaining a small pocket of autonomy and freedom where he still feels competent and in control. He fears that if he fully re-engages in the emotional life of the marriage, he will be subjecting himself to an endless cycle of self-improvement projects dictated by his partner. He fears he will be continually molded, managed, and found wanting. He wants to be chosen for who he is, flaws and all, but he feels relentlessly corrected for who he is. When he goes silent at dinner, staring into his plate, he is often thinking, if I open my mouth, I will either say the wrong thing, or she will tell me why my opinion is flawed, or I'll just set off another argument. It's safer here in the silence. The silence becomes a protective boundary, an invisible shield that keeps the perceived emotional threat at bay. Furthermore, there is a profound difference in emotional wiring regarding communication. Many men are taught that emotions are a signal for action or solution, not just a state to be shared. When the wife speaks about her sadness or frustration, he instinctively looks for a button to push to fix it. When she says, "I'm overwhelmed by the house and the kids," he thinks, "Okay, I'll hire a cleaner or I'll take the kids tomorrow." But often, she just needed him to listen, validate her pain, and acknowledge the burden. When his solution is rejected, because she felt unheard, he feels deeply misunderstood and dismissed. He interprets her emotional expression as a puzzle he has failed to solve, and like any good engineer, when a system repeatedly fails, he moves on to a different, less frustrating system, the internal exit. He starts investing his emotional energy into areas where the rules are clear, the effort is measurable, and the competence is rewarded, such as his career or physical pursuits. His mental browser is crowded with tabs dedicated to his work, his fantasy football league, or planning a fishing trip, anything except the marital communication tab, which he has long learned to close immediately due to the constant crashing. He is still warming the bed, but his soul has checked into a long-stay hotel across town. His presence is merely the ghost of his initial commitment. The hardest part for him is the silent suffering, the deep, profound loneliness he feels while being physically right next to the person he vowed to spend his life with, all because he cannot find the language to ask for validation without feeling weak. This is where we step in as the interpreter, translating the language of the man's inner exit into the emotional language the woman can finally understand. Most of the relational pain comes not from a lack of love, but from a fundamental misreading of intent. When he goes quiet, retreating to his phone, the garage, or the long-running show on the television, what she hears is rejection. Her internal translator tells her, "He doesn't care about me. He values his solitude/entertainment more than he values our connection. I am not important enough to fight for." She interprets his silence as a judgment on her worth and a sign that the marriage is dissolving. Her resulting actions are often to try harder, to become more insistent, or to withdraw herself as a defense mechanism against the expected abandonment. She believes if she pursues hard enough, she can force him back to the negotiation table, but this pursuit, unfortunately, is the very air he needs to escape to breathe. What he is often trying to communicate through his silence is survival. His inner translator is saying, "I am overwhelmed. I don't know how to solve this problem. I need a safe space to decompress. I am terrified that if I open my mouth, I will be judged again, or that I will make her cry, and I can't handle the feeling of being the source of her pain." His silence is not about rejecting her. It is about preserving the last sliver of his emotional energy and protecting himself from the feeling of failure. He goes quiet to regulate his nervous system, which has flagged the conversation as emotionally dangerous. The problem is that his attempt at self-preservation is received by her as a direct attack on the relationship itself, thus fueling her pursuit and creating a deeper rift. His avoidance is a desperate plea for a ceasefire, but she interprets it as him declaring war on their intimacy. Let's look at the classic scenario of the repeated complaint. She brings up the same issue, the chores, the lack of quality time, the distance, for the 10th time. What he hears is nagging, disrespect, and the message, "You are fundamentally flawed." His immediate emotional reaction is resistance and defensiveness, causing him to dismiss her concern or offer a cold, technical solution. He sees her repetition as a scoreboard, constantly reminding him of his deficiencies. To him, the fact that she has to repeat the complaint means he failed the first 9 times, reinforcing the very feeling of inadequacy that drives him into his internal bunker. He may even start to feel like the only reason she stays is because she can use him as a permanent project to fix. What she is actually saying, in her emotional language, is vulnerability. When a woman brings up the same issue over and over, it rarely means she needs a technical solution. It means she needs recognition and validation for the internal burden she carries. Her repetition is often a desperate cry for him to step across the emotional gap and simply say, "I see you. I see how hard you're working and how heavy this is for you. You're not carrying this alone." The issue itself, the dirty dishes, for instance, is often just the visible symptom. The underlying message is, "I feel alone in this burden, and I don't know how else to reach you." When he dismisses the issue, he dismisses her feeling, which confirms her fear of being fundamentally unchosen and unseen. When he offers to hire a cleaner, she hears, "I will pay someone else to care about your feelings, because I cannot." This is the ultimate communication breakdown. Both are using their respective emotional languages. She speaks validation/connection. He speaks competence/solution, but the message is lost in translation, leading to mutual injury. They are standing on opposite sides of a river, shouting different languages, both believing the other is willfully ignoring their fundamental needs. The failure to translate these signals results in a disastrous cycle. His avoidance, his way of seeking safety and self-worth, registers as her abandonment, which triggers her deepest fears. Her pursuit, her way of seeking connection and reassurance, registers as his criticism, which triggers his deepest fears of inadequacy. They are both acting from a place of primal self-protection, yet their defensive maneuvers look exactly like aggression to the other side. This is why it's so critical to understand that he is not emotionally left because he hates her. He is left because he feels utterly defeated, misunderstood, and emotionally unsafe in the relationship, and his primary need is now simply to find a place of psychological rest. The physical body stays in the bed, but the emotional man has already found a silent, lonely room elsewhere. The real danger is that this inner exit becomes comfortable, a quiet habit that feels less painful than the risk of real intimacy, making the possibility of true reconnection fade further into the background noise of their life together. Now we must go under the surface and confront the harsh truths that enable this emotional exit, because wishing for change without seeing the shadow parts of your behavior is a recipe for stagnation. The first harsh truth is this: The inner exit is often caused by emotional laziness and a failure of courageous vulnerability on both sides. For him, it's easier to stay silent and retreat into the numbing comfort of his own world than to face the discomfort of his partner's unhappiness and risk the shame of failing to fix it. He is choosing temporary peace over genuine connection. This is emotional laziness, a refusal to stay present in the messy, hard work of relationship maintenance. He needs to own that his silence is a form of passive-aggressive control. It prevents conflict but kills intimacy. He uses his fatigue, his work, or his hobbies as a psychological shield, rationalizing that he needs the space, when in reality, he is simply avoiding the necessary emotional labor. The corresponding harsh truth for her is that the constant pursuit, especially when it involves consistent criticism or resentment, often stems from a fear of losing control, which leads to a form of emotional scorekeeping. She needs to own that the way she brings up issues is often a setup for his failure. When she stacks up complaints or uses "you always" or "you never" language, she may feel righteous. But what she is doing is demanding repair from a wounded place that simultaneously demolishes his capacity to help. She is subconsciously keeping a ledger of his relational failures, and every time she presents this account, he sees the debt and chooses to default on the emotional loan rather than risk further punitive interest. The resentment she harbors because she feels unheard becomes a weapon that reinforces his belief that he can never satisfy her, thus accelerating his retreat. She is pursuing connection, but her method of pursuit guarantees disconnection. A third, deeply uncomfortable truth is that the man who leaves inside is often hiding in plain sight behind a facade of being a good provider. This is especially true across many international cultures where a man's worth is disproportionately tied to his economic contribution. He uses his work, his income, or his loyalty to the family structure as an emotional shield. He implicitly argues, "Look at all I do physically for this family. That should be enough." This is a defense against having to be emotionally vulnerable. He is trading the deep work of intimacy for the quantifiable, manageable work of logistics. He needs to own that while provision is crucial, it is an insufficient substitute for presence. When a woman complains about feeling distant, and he counters with, "I pay all the bills," he is revealing his core avoidance strategy, using financial contribution to avoid emotional contribution. He must realize that his partner doesn't need a wallet. She needs a window into his soul, and that is a currency he is refusing to spend. The shared harsh truth, one that affects both equally, is the quiet sabotage of quiet revenge. When the emotional distance persists, the warmth is often replaced by subtle, non-verbal acts of reciprocal neglect. He leaves his socks on the floor, knowing it bothers her. She forgets to tell him about a social event he might have enjoyed. These are not mistakes. They are tiny, unconscious acts of retaliation, a way of evening the score for the pain the other person is causing. This slow poison of quiet revenge erodes the foundation of goodwill, replacing it with transactional behavior. "I'll be nice to you only if you're nice to me first." This kind of unspoken scorekeeping is the final stage before complete emotional abandonment. Recognizing these truths, the laziness, the scorekeeping, the shield of provision, and the revenge, is the only way to stop the spiral, because it forces both individuals to look at their own contributions to the problem, not just their partners. The good news is that the emotional exit, while deeply painful, is reversible if both partners commit to a few realistic shifts. These are not grand gestures, but small, consistent rerouting of emotional traffic. One of the most effective ways to reverse the man's retreat is to implement a no fixing, just witnessing rule for a brief daily check-in. For 10 to 15 minutes each day, the woman commits to sharing one burden or emotion without asking him to solve it, and he commits to listening without offering a solution, rationalizing, or correcting her feeling. He must explicitly use a phrase like, "That sounds really heavy," or "I can see why you're frustrated by that." This simple act of validating her internal world, her feeling, without demanding a solution bypasses his fear of failure. It teaches him that his presence and empathy are, in fact, the solution, making him feel useful again in the emotional landscape of the relationship. For her part, she must resist the urge to immediately complain about his listening skills or to escalate the issue. She must accept that he is showing up as best he can in that moment. A second crucial shift is for the man to practice courageous initiation. Because he fears being judged, he often waits for his partner to initiate connection or conflict, which reinforces the cycle of pursuit and withdrawal. To combat the inner exit, he must actively, even if awkwardly, initiate emotional or physical connection one time per week. This could be as simple as asking one honest, non-logistical question about her life. What's something I don't know about your day that made you feel proud? Or, what's one thing you are looking forward to this week? He needs to stop waiting for permission and start showing up uninvited into the shared emotional space. This action signals to his wife that he is willingly re-engaging, not just complying under duress, which is essential for rebuilding trust. For the woman who has been keeping the score, the practical way out involves adopting the one request only rule. Instead of listing a general complaint, "You never help me with the house," she should focus on making one clear, actionable request without any accompanying resentment, historical context, or emotional charge. "Could you please take the recycling out right now?" This reduces his defensive reaction because the request is simple and actionable, allowing him to experience a quick, successful contribution. When he completes the request, she must immediately reward the action with genuine, simple gratitude, not a sarcastic, "finally," but a warm, "Thank you, that helped me so much." This rewires his brain to associate engagement with positive reinforcement, appreciation, instead of failure, criticism. Finally, both partners need to establish a mutual, safe word for overload. In the heat of an argument or a critical moment, either partner should be able to use a pre-agreed-upon phrase, like "red zone," which instantly halts the conversation for a minimum of 30 minutes. This is not permission to leave the house or shut down entirely. It's an agreement to come back to the conversation after a brief, regulated pause. This gives the man, in particular, the chance to disengage before his nervous system takes him into the full inner exit, and it shows the woman that her partner isn't fleeing the issue, only rescheduling the discussion for a safer, calmer time. These shifts are about creating a new, predictable emotional safety structure to replace the harmful, predictable loop they were stuck in. This journey toward understanding is fundamentally about rejecting the fantasy that love should be easy. No one handed us a manual for navigating the complexities of long-term intimacy. We are all just wounded kids trying to love from inside adult bodies, attempting to create closeness while protecting the hurts of our past. When the man takes the inner exit, he is not intentionally trying to be cruel. He is simply using the best survival strategy his system knows: emotional withdrawal to avoid shame and perceived failure. And when the woman pursues him with resentment, she is not trying to control him. She is using the best survival strategy her system knows: desperate pursuit to avoid the terror of emotional abandonment and invisibility. Both are acting from a place of deep, legitimate fear.